So a couple of summers ago, I was able to be a part of your baptism. Maybe why did you want to be baptized? Maybe start there.
Yeah,
Why was that?
Yeah, I think I just reached this point where, I wanted to declare Jesus as number one in my life.
Yeah.
And I wanted to kind of shed my previous life and really start living a life for his approval, not others. It was important to us, to do publicly, like you talk about on Baptism Sunday. Something I've been thinking about, wanting to do for a long time, and I know we had talked about it, prayed about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just, I felt like I wanted to do it on my own.
Well, hey crew, what's up? I hope you're doing well. This is The Conversation. Today we're at episode 273, and our guest today is a founder of a clothing company called Tommy John. But so much more than that for me personally. He's also one of my closest friends. I'm so excited for you to hear this conversation. Regardless of where you are, just know each week I do these conversations for you, the listeners, and I don't take it lightly that you would spend the time with me. Before we continue on though, I want to give a huge shout out to our partners. Each week these partners help make the conversation possible. Our first partner is who we just mentioned, Tommy John Clothing. If you haven't worn Tommy John, honestly, I would argue you haven't lived yet. I'm wearing Tommy John as we speak. Tommy John has thousands and thousands of 5-star reviews and over 20 million pairs of Tommy John sold. Whether it's undershirts, underwear, modern polos, you are going to absolutely love Tommy John. My current favorite is their pajamas. Specifically this time of the year, there is nothing better than putting on some Tommy John PJs. To find out more, or better yet, to go do some shopping, go check out TommyJohn.com. Again, that's TommyJohn.com. Friends, here's the best part about Tommy John being a partner. Every single week for the rest of the year, we're giving out two $50 gift cards to Tommy John Clothing, and all you need to do is enter one time for a chance to win every week for the rest of the year. And here's the two simple things that you just need to do. First, go subscribe to The Conversation, whether it's on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, do that. The second thing, go and subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's at Adam A. Weber. Just go there and subscribe. Do those two things, and then just let me know you did those two things, and you will be signed up for the rest of the year. The last two winners are Andrew H. and Tom R. are both winners of these two $50 Tommy John gift cards. What is up to that? Our second partner today is Generous Coffee. I love Generous Coffee. Their founder, Ben Higgins, is a brother of mine. Love the guy so much. Generous Coffee doesn't just sell amazing coffee. They also make a positive impact by donating 100% of the money they make to nonprofits who help others around the world. The church I pastor has brewed Generous Coffee every week for the last couple of years, and the response has been amazing. Our people love it. If your church or business brews coffee, you can buy the coffee in bulk. They were cheaper than any other coffee place we could find. And again, their coffee's amazing. They give away the profits. So go to generouscoffee.com, send them an email and say, hey, I want to buy in bulk. I promise you, you will not regret it. Okay? Today, though, as I mentioned, our guest is Tom Patterson. He is best known as the founder of Tommy John Clothing. But again, he's so much more than that. He's a wonderful, awesome, amazing human that I'm honored to call my friend. And I don't say that lightly. Tom has been on several podcasts, including the Ed Milet Show, where he's shared the story of Tommy John. I want to encourage you to go check out that interview to hear the Tommy John story. Today, though, Tom shares more on the personal side. And for me, this is why this is such an honor. From sharing about a candid, life-changing panic attack back in 2018, Tom shares some of his upbringing as a kid. Fun fact, Tom and I both grew up in Millbank, South Dakota. I've literally known Tom my entire life, but more than anything else in this episode, Tom shares about when he began to follow Jesus, what that journey's looked like, and specifically when he decided to get baptized in 2023. I was there that that day, got to be a part of the baptism. It's a day I will never forget. And so friends, on that note, sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation.
So Tom, we typically hear a person's highlight reels. Are you willing to share a current unpretty part of your life, whether it's stress, grief, jadedness? It could be anything unpretty.
Oh man, I try to keep it positive, but I think everybody has some unpretty parts. I think one we've talked about was back in 2018. I was sitting in a meeting in our company, and my throat started closing up. I was like getting dizzy, really starting to sweat. I wish the fans that are on me right now I had back then. But something fell off, so I got up and I just walked out of this meeting, which I never do. And I walked over by a receptionist's desk, and I thought I was like having a heart attack. I couldn't breathe. I thought, is this really how I'm going to go out?
Yeah.
So I went and sat down on a couch, and they say when dogs die, they try to go hide in like a window well.
Yes.
I think I was trying to hide so nobody saw what was happening because I didn't know what was happening. And it was the longest 2 minutes of my life. And it was really scary. I didn't know what it was. And later on in the day, I started searching, and I realized I had a panic attack, which I'd never had before. And, at the time, I had 2 kids under 4 years old.
Yep.
The business was incredibly stressful. We were 2 weeks away from our 10-year anniversary. And my parents were going through some personal struggles, and it was just the overwhelm of overwhelm. I didn't know how to process it all. And, and learning and reading and speaking to other entrepreneur friends, even friends who are professional athletes, more of them have had panic attacks than not. I haven't had one since. And, what I learned also is, I think over the next week, I kind of had this intervention, which I didn't know, where my wife, Erin, our head of people, and our president, a really good friend of mine, John, sat me down and they said, look, you need to leave for a couple weeks. You haven't been yourself.
Yep.
You're burned out. And they were right. So I literally the day after our 10-year anniversary, 4% of companies make it 10 years. Such a highlight, but also going through a really tough time. And, I spent the next couple weeks and ever since then really working on myself, my emotions, how to process stressful times. And that was one I've never shared really with only a small handful of people, but I think there's probably a lot of listeners who've had that.
Yes.
They're insecure, they're embarrassed. I didn't talk about it for a really long time, but yeah, it's real. And I didn't realize what they were like, and they're no fun.
Yeah. Well, Tom, I'm honored you'd share that. And so the two of us have known each other for years. Even just thinking about all the different times our lives have crossed, I mean, it's insane.
Yeah.
And honestly, consider you one of my closest friends. And
Thank you.
just somebody that I feel like I can be totally candid with, and just someone I respect so much. For this, before we hit record, it was like, is there anything that you hope to whatever? And I said, I want to interview Tom Patterson, not the founder of Tommy John. And it was something I've always tried to tell you is you're so much more than just, and not just the founder of Tommy John, but you're just so much more than that. And that's the person that I love being with. And that's the person I love just in you. And so your personal story, I know a lot of it. Just even if you want to share kind of the Cliff Notes version of who you are, like, again, you can mention Tommy John if you want to, because that's such a huge part of work, is a huge thing for all of us. It'd be weird for me to talk about my life without saying I'm a pastor. But if you'd want to say the Cliff Notes version of you.
Yeah, I mean, we both grew up in Melbourne, South Dakota. I think your first kiss was my sister.
It's true.
Funny
No
but
joke.
true story. I obviously wasn't there to enforce that at the time. But yeah, I grew up in a middle class family, maybe sometimes upper middle class, sometimes lower middle class. Sometimes I think it felt financially unstable, but had hardworking parents, very involved grandparents, who played a big role in my life and my sister's lives. And I think we grew up in just this humble, hardworking, well-mannered, kind community that I've really grown to appreciate as I've gotten older, but really taught me the values of just being human, working hard, earning things versus deserving things. And I think it really shaped me later on, especially with how I look for people to, whether come into the company that I want to build relationships with. And I think what makes it as unique is, you've known me since before Tommy John.
Yeah.
And I've known you since before Embrace and the podcast, and lots of great memories. But yeah, there's no coincidences. The fact that we've crossed paths so many times and we become such close friends, and such respect for you and what you do and the impact that you have for people. But yeah, I think my upbringing was unique from a lot of ways, but very blessed at the same time to have grown up where we did.
So Millbank, from there, where did you go from there? Like school-wise, share that part too.
Yeah, so I had lawn mowing businesses. I'd shovel and snow blow driveways before school, after football practice, always finding ways to make money. After college,
where do you think the drive came? Where did that come from, do you think?
I think a lot of entrepreneurs are born. I don't know, for whatever way, I was just wired that way. My family were business operators. They didn't start a business. It was a third generation business. I didn't want to be a fourth generation funeral director. It just wasn't my deal. But I don't know. I've always kind of hustled and been curious and wanted to understand why things work the way they do, how people get to where they are. And, I've just always asked a lot of questions. And I think by doing that, I became comfortable networking with grown-ups, speaking to adults when I was in junior high and high school. And I think I didn't understand what I was learning at the time, but a lot of it was just EQ, street smarts, emotional intelligence. And I think now it's become such an advantage in life to understand emotions and people versus book smarts. And I'm not saying that because I wasn't book smart, because I really wasn't. I was always a B student, no matter how much I tried. But but I think in my instance, it was really, it was probably just born that way. I wasn't, like, my parents weren't, go start a business, I'll understand P&L and cash flow and operating expenses. It was just something I enjoyed doing.
Wow. So then when you left Millbank, where'd you go there?
Ended up going to Arizona State, got a degree in business communications, which is basically means you don't know what you want to do. And after college, I worked through college. I financed most of my education. I valeted cars. I sold cell phones at a kiosk.
I didn't know this part. Keep going.
In Fashion Square Mall, I was a valet at a resort called the Phoenician, a 5-star resort in Scottsdale. And then after college,
that even there again, probably learning crap you didn't even know you were learning.
Yeah. I mean, fortunately, didn't crash any cars. A lot of interesting people that came through. But I think there was always a balance of working and studying. And so after school, I got into medical devices. So think of Will Smith in The Pursuit of Happiness, selling bone scanners. My uncle was a urologist and took me to dinner one night with a bunch of medical device reps my senior year, and they were explaining to me what they did. And my uncle explained that a lot of them do really well, and you're working with people. And I was like, sign me up. That sounds great. So I got into that, and I liked it. I wouldn't say I loved it. Did that for a while, and then in 2007 is really when the idea for Tommy John began.
Yeah, that's great. And right around that time, you would have met Erin by that time too. Share that part of things.
So we met in 2006. I was living in San Diego. She was living in Phoenix. We met through mutual friends, and we dated long distance for a year. She was a financial advisor at Chase. I was selling medical devices in San Diego, and then convinced her to move out a year later. And so, we've been together ever since.
That's crazy. Really quick on this. One of my favorite things, your name is the business.
Kind of.
Yeah. One of my favorite things though is, a lot of times it'll be you and Erin standing together and people are talking to you. And one of the things I always love is there's not an ounce of like, I feel like I need to do this for my marriage sake. It's like you always bring Erin into it. Yeah. And you'll immediately almost try to shift the focus even.
Yeah.
And I just love that about you. I love that about you because Erin's awesome.
Thanks. And for those that don't know, my middle name's John.
Yeah.
People call me Tommy. Anybody
Yeah.
that's known me since I was a kid or in diapers. So there's no relation to the baseball pitcher. But I don't know. The older I've got, I don't think there are self-made people. There's people that contribute and help and believe in you. And Erin was one of those. And, even though the name is my first and middle name, it's so much of it's her. There would be no Tommy John without her and others who've worked for us along the way, advisors, mentors. So, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I can't.
But every time you do it, I don't know why. Every time you do it, it ministers to me because I just think it's awesome. So I don't know why. Every time I hear, because again, everybody's trying to talk to you right away,
Yeah.
and it's almost like Erin's an afterthought, and you're like, hey, wait a second.
Hey, man, she's the secret sauce.
So I just think that's
She's
cool. Okay, so leaving the business part out of this next part of the equation, you've been interviewed some great podcasts, so go listen to that there. Life-wise, kind of away from Tommy John, share kind of from there. So you're in San Diego, it starts to take off, the business does. Life-wise, what does the next stretch of years look like from there?
So we started Tommy John in 2008. Right during the financial crisis, the housing market crashed, the retail recession began, and I was laid off my medical sales job, and I was really at this crossroads where, do I go all in on this, or should I play it safe and get a job? I liked medical sales. I didn't love it, but I didn't want to have regrets 20 years from now. Thinking I had this idea, I could have, I should have, I would have. I didn't want to have excuses, and the next day I read a story that said the best time to start a company is during a recession. So anybody listening, now is the time to start a company because I think we're in a recession. So I didn't really have anything to lose and I had everything to gain. My mindset was if I lose everything, my savings, my 401k, I can always go back and get a job in medical sales. I was good at it. I won some awards, but I didn't want to regret going down this path. And that mindset is really what gave me the confidence and the comfort to go forward with it, Adam.
Yeah.
And then 3 months later, got a meeting with the Neiman Marcus buyer. We ended up getting launched into Neiman Marcus in August of 2009, and then Nordstrom shortly after. So yeah, it's just, someone said, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time.
Yeah.
And we didn't realize what we were biting off at the time because we didn't come from fashion. We didn't have any contacts.
Yeah.
We didn't have any connections. But the benefit was we didn't have any bias of the way things were supposed to be done.
So good.
We just figured it out along the way. We're blessed to have found really impactful mentors and advisors along the way that helped us, I think, avoid making a lot of really fatal mistakes.
Yeah. So, and those, again, kind of away from talking even about the company, the two of you, your marriage, was it basically all work, no play, or in those early years were you still able to do both?
Yeah.
And maybe it was the same thing. It's like, this is fun, whatever.
I would say it was both. I think we always were intentional about the time spent away from the business, but really, Erin was helping me from day one, and then a year into it, she ended up getting laid off of her software sales job. And it was actually the best thing that could have ever happened because I was overwhelmed with Tommy John was taking off, and her strengths were areas that I was really weak in, whether it's Excel, customer service, anything done in a pivot table, planning, inventory planning, customer service, where I was spending more time on marketing, branding, sales, product.
Yep.
So we enjoyed it because our strengths, our skill sets were opposite.
Yep.
But yeah, we loved it. We lived in a 400 square foot apartment in Los Angeles. And, this is 2009. And then in 2010, we decided to move the business to New York City. We didn't have this bucket list idea of having to check off living in New York City. It was really where we felt we could grow the business the quickest, where the industry talent was, being the fashion center of the world.
Yep.
And, we ran a $3 million business out of our apartment for a year or two. And it was fun, And I think in hindsight, I remember people coming in and are like, wow, you guys are really sacrificing a lot. And they probably felt bad for us. Man, they don't know what they're getting into. And I don't think we had the wherewithal to understand maybe optically how bad it looked.
Yeah.
Because we just like doing it. And I think for anybody out there, I would just follow something you're passionate about. Because everybody that ends up doing well in life, whether it's financially, personally, whatever, the common thread is they started doing something because it wasn't for the money. They loved the product, the idea, the disruption that was happening. And that was, I mean, I never thought in a million years we'd be making men's underwear, especially as a kid. But it's a really fascinating industry and business the more you get to know about it.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Faith journey.
Yeah.
I'm totally taking a shift. Again, you've been like Ed Milet. There's been so many great interviews. That was an amazing interview.
Thank you.
So go watch that. Faith-wise, if share as much as your upbringing, faith-wise, and when there began to be a shift inside of you.
Sure. Yeah, I think like most small town kids in South Dakota, you grew up going to church. Yeah. In Melbank, where we grew, there's probably one church for every, 200 or 300 people. It's just kind of what you do. And, I went to church. I grew up in I would say a Christian household. And then I would say after college, I would come back, go to Christmas and Easter. I would go to go to church on Christmas or Easter during the holidays. And that was it. And when I met Aaron, we started going to a place called the Dream Center in Los Angeles, north of Los Angeles, where it was just a really eclectic group of people from, politicians to athletes to gangbangers to business people. And it was just a melting pot of different diversities and backgrounds, and we loved it.
Why do you think you went? Was it Aaron more?
No,
or
a friend
you?
of ours, a doctor that we had been seeing, invited us with him. And he was a believer. He was a Christian, Ed Wagner, and we started going with him, and we loved it.
Do you think it was because of you just wanted to like say yes to his invitation, or what? Why do you think you started? Why do you think you went? Just to like a kind of like a kind gesture, or were you searching? Do you think?
No, we loved him. He's become a good friend, and I think we were open to it. We were open to, I think, diving back into our faith together. And it was right. We went for maybe 3 or 4 times, and then we ended up moving to New York shortly after that. But that was really the venture of, I think, going down a faith journey together.
Yeah.
So back in 2009, 2010. And then journey since then, we would go to church.
Really quick.
Yeah.
Do you think before going to that church, this is a question I don't think I've asked you, was there times when you thought about spiritual things? Like, do you feel like that? Or were you just like I'm kind of in business mode right now and not thinking about that? I've never asked that to you.
Yeah, I would say we went down the path of the universe and spirituality, exploring different religions. It's California, right? Living in California, I think that's what you do. And I think what we realized is after maybe experiencing what those meant to other people, I think it made us realize that becoming a Christian was more important, or a priority for us. But it wasn't going to church every week. It wasn't reading the Bible consistently.
Yeah.
I think the term organized religion was something I always thought about, a lot. And I think it wasn't until we started finding churches that had a more relatable message that it really started to resonate. The Dream Center, Hillsong, Embrace, there were shorter messages, more digestible to us, incorporating scripture and real life events, music, whatever. And I think with the environment today for churches and being a Christian, it's so much more, I think, absorbable and spongy, even for kids.
Yeah.
And I think my experience as a kid growing up was I didn't really understand because I never got the context about what scripture meant and the messages, and it wasn't discussed in our home. And I probably felt embarrassed not to know, so I didn't ask, and things like, confirmation and Sunday school. But I think, probably getting into the business world, I became more curious, and then I started observing different people, whether it's, athletes, celebrities, business people, anybody that had reached a certain level of success in their area. The theme I found is a lot of them were Christians, but they had great marriages. They made great kids. The generations continued to evolve and grow. So it was just something I felt more and more pulled to.
Yeah, that's amazing. One of my favorite things, and I'm honored that I can even share it here. One of my favorite memories of you, Tom, is you came to a Christmas Eve service at Embrace. It was the first time that we had seen each other in years. And as I was preaching, there was standing room only at that service. I just remember it being a really full service. As I'm preaching, I look and I notice your cousins first, and I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
the Cooks are here. That's cool."
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, as I'm preaching, I'm like, "Is that Tom Patterson?" And the thing that always strikes me, honestly, it makes me emotional thinking about it. In a room where everyone, and this isn't a negative thing about everyone else, everyone was sitting like a normal person sits, and like you were the one person that was leaning in. And it was almost like one of those photos that were like everybody's taking a picture in an event, and there's that one person who's actually taking it in.
Yeah.
They just stick out, and you just, that posture, I feel like I've seen that posture inside of you when it comes to the Lord.
Yeah.
Is you leaning in and of like, no, I want more. Like I'm not okay where I'm at. Like I want to know more about God. And that's a moment I'll never forget. And then after that service is when we talked, and really it was like, what are you doing here?
Yeah,
Like, what's
yeah.
going on?
It's been so long, other than like Facebook pictures, that we've
Yeah.
really seen each other in person.
Yeah, just crazy to think about. So a couple of summers ago, I was able to be a part of your baptism. Maybe why did you want to be baptized? Maybe start there. Like,
Yeah,
why was that?
Yeah, I think I just reached this point where, I wanted to declare Jesus as number one in my life.
Yeah,
And I wanted to kind of shed my previous life and really start living a life for his approval, not others. And I think that's also just reading about the statistics, which something like 98% of couples who pray together stay together, 93% of kids who have a dad who's a Christian become a Christian. Those are really scary numbers. And our kids were at the age where I think that experience was going to be memorable to them.
yeah,
So it was intentional, but also what we hope has long-lasting impact
yeah,
for them. And yeah, I just think that's something that it was important to us, to do publicly, like you talk about on Baptism Sunday. Something I've been thinking about, wanting to do for a long time, and I know we had talked about it, prayed about it.
yeah,
But yeah, it was just I felt like I wanted to do it on my own.
Yeah.
I think many of us were baptized as kids,
Yeah.
and we don't remember
yeah,
our dedication. And whether you're 42 or 43, which I was, or you're listening in 60, it doesn't matter. Like
Yeah.
you're never too young or too old to do it, if that's really what you want. And I think so much has changed in a positive way when you go through that experience. It's tough to fully relate until you do it yourself.
yeah,
But I would say you have to have valid reasons why you want to do it. Just don't do it because your friends are doing it,
Yeah.
or don't do it because you're seeing people on social media do it. You really need to be intentional and think through. And I know we had discussed it, and you gave me some things to share with my daughter Violet, who was baptized, and talk through with her
Yeah.
to see if she was really ready for it. And then,
yeah.
we know others decided that day
Yeah.
that they also wanted to be baptized.
It was one of the coolest, honestly, one of the coolest things I've ever been a part of. So I went, Becca and I stayed at your lake place with the intent of baptizing you and Violet.
That's right.
And then it was either that day or that week that Erin, she's like, I
The
want
night before.
Yeah.
The night before.
I want to be baptized too. So Tom's wife, so that makes 3. And then you had a couple of friends, like a
Justin
couple
and Elise
were
were there.
staying there. And so before we did the baptism, again, I thought I was just baptizing 3 of you. I explained fully what it means to follow Jesus. And then she decided she wanted to be baptized as well,
Yeah.
which is like, so now it's up to 4. And then there was another gal who was there just around the house that I just kept feeling like, gosh, I feel like she should hear what I'm going to share about what it means to follow Jesus and be baptized. And she ended up getting baptized as well. And I'll never forget this of like us being out there, and one of your neighbors thought somebody had like drowned or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So they like came over, but baptizing the 5 of you was one of the coolest things. And I remember telling you that day, like just you and Violet stepping out and just the ripple that even just happened there with 5 people total. But even just away from that, I just have no doubt when we step out in faith, God meets us in those places, And then there's effects of those steps and for good when it comes to the Lord. And it's something I will never, ever forget.
Same. I mean, we've got pictures to never forget it too. But yeah, it was a really special experience, man.
Yeah. It's awesome.
One of the coolest days of my life.
Yeah.
No doubt.
What would be your advice if someone is curious about God? What would be your advice? Like, what do you think you needed to hear when you were in the midst of like kind of exploring spirituality in general? Is there anything you would say to somebody who's just like, I don't know where I'm at?
Yeah.
Or like, what would you tell them?
I would say don't type it in on ChatGPT. It's funny. For me personally, when I had a lot of challenges in life, I looked to whether it's motivational speakers. We've been to Tony Robbins events.
Yep.
And mindset type environments. The power of positive thinking. And I felt like I tried everything, and it would work and make little tweaks. And a lot of what you saw was the work that we put in private, but it just never got me to the level of peace and satisfaction that I wanted until I really went deeper in my faith. And I think a lot of times things need to get hard before you go down that path. And I just, whatever block was on me, in my 20s or 30s, it just went away once I really started, living for Jesus.
Yeah.
And not being Christian-ish, or going to church 3 or 4 times a year, going through the motions, or sending it in or checking a box, but really understanding like what it means to be a Christian. And I think also becoming a parent. I was maybe an older parent when I started having kids, but that kind of flips what's important and why things are certain ways, and things that frame your beliefs and your kids and others. So I was blessed to grow up in an environment where I had church and exposure. But now there's so many different testimonials and YouTube and stories you can understand and learn. I mean, I don't think people really understand how fortunate they are with the benefits of technology, where you can learn about Jesus and churches and podcasts like you have, and tell real stories about people's journey, to Him. Only way we were able to learn about that is through, going to our church or Sunday school or theology school, right?
Yeah.
Where you went.
Yeah. Oh,
now it's just information everywhere.
Yeah. And it's just it's really just seeking it out. Faith, one last faith question. Bringing so many people are not pastors, they're in the business field. And for you had Tommy John going really before you began to fully follow Jesus. How do you bring faith into your workplace? Whether you're the owner, what does that look like for you? And has it been challenging? What's that been like?
Well, I think there's maybe certain parts of the world where it's a little more difficult. New York, I think, is one of those.
Yeah.
When we started, and we still aren't, we were never a political brand, a social activist brand, a religious brand. Comfort doesn't take sides.
Yep.
Underwear shouldn't have to be any of those things I mentioned.
That's good.
But we were just hardworking. Treat people how you want to be treated. Honestly, like living by the 10 Commandments. Accidentally. Yeah. And I think by doing so, a lot of the values that we have today, a lot of the people in the culture, whether you're religious or not, they are biblical values.
Yeah.
They are Christian values. So we don't outwardly have to say that. But I would say as I've came out more openly, in public about being a believer and sharing how my faith has impacted my life, it's funny, the type of message that I get from people, mostly positive. And I think now we're kind of in this moment now where so many people at high levels are being more open about their faith.
Yep.
And they're okay taking some arrows.
Yep.
Or taking some negative feedback, but Jesus loved everybody regardless. And we don't judge whatever your beliefs are, your beliefs, but I'm comfortable, I think, standing for and being open about what is important in our life. Yep. And it's leading to an eternal life.
I have so much respect for that. I shared at a faith and business conference recently, and I said, honestly, sometimes when a person flies, like business-wise, the Christian flag too high, like you find out your plumber is a Christian, it's like, are you still gonna just fix my toilet? Like I want, you know what I mean? Like it's sad that sometimes it's like, can you tell me that you're a Christian after you fix my toilet and it works? You know what I mean? But I think so often we feel like we need to like lead with that instead of like, no, I have this company that it's its own separate thing. Again, that's not me as a human. That's like it's an organization. I'm just gonna live out what it looks like to be Jesus. And in my personal life, for sure, I'm gonna talk about the Lord openly and stuff like that. But hopefully being a Christian business person means that whatever you do it to the best of your ability, the best quality, the most innovative way that you can, the most honest way that you can, the most generous way that you can. And so, yeah, again, like I told that business group, I'm like, I'm always nervous when the plumber tells me he's a Christian first. I'm like, I just want my toilet to work. And so, but if you end up fixing my toilet and then tell me you follow Jesus, I'm like, okay, this is great. I love you.
Yeah.
But I see that oftentimes we fly it too high and then we're not a good plumber, or we're a dishonest plumber, or we're an angry plumber, or we're a shady plumber. It's like, hey, can you just like live out the life of Jesus? And then, like, you know what I mean? I think there's something powerful when we lead that way. So
Yeah, and I think like you should maybe share this, like everybody's a work in progress.
Yeah.
Just because you're a Christian doesn't mean you're perfect. And
Yeah.
I think that's the part, I want people to understand, like I still make mistakes. Of course, there's things I wish I would have done differently. Even as a Christian, but that life is all about learning from your mistakes. And sometimes mistakes are oftentimes the best lessons, in life. And I think that just depends on what's the perception of your reality. But I think when you look at it through really a biblical lens, for me, it's just been like the color of the lens that I needed to change in a big way, that I've seen just my life change.
Yeah. Well, Tom, I'm so grateful for the time today. And even with that your baptism story, it's been so cool because that day is something I'll never forget. And yet it's pretty cool. Like this is the first time, at least, I've talked about it publicly. And it's just so cool. Sometimes it's like they're so holy that you don't need to talk about them right away. And there's like, in a world that's quick to share everything, I think there's something really, really cool about, gosh, 2 summers ago, God did this. And now today we're here talking about it. And so just grateful for you. And I feel like, again, people love to talk about great underwear, and it is the best underwear. You finally got me to throw out all my other underwear about 1.5 years ago. And
got through all those plastic bags.
Oh, I did. Yeah. But I still, no kidding, have some unopened undershirts that I haven't worn. But more than that, like just I'm just grateful for the person that you are. So just very,
thanks,
very
Adam.
grateful.
You too. Your podcast has reached so many and impacted so many, and the people that you have are people I've admired for a really long time. So to be on here and share my message, and even if it impacts one person, it's worthwhile.
Yeah.
Well, friends, I'm so glad that you tuned in. A huge shout out to our guest, Tom. I love and appreciate you so much. Thanks for all the ways that you've blessed me, including being on my podcast. Thanks to our partners, Tommy John Clothing and Generous Coffee, who helped make this episode of The Conversation possible. And lastly, but not leastly, thanks for all of you who listen to the conversation. One of my greatest joys is when someone will stop me just to say, hey, I listened to your podcast. Actually, on Halloween, I had a dad was trick-or-treating with his kids, and he said to me, hey, you don't know me, but I listen to the podcast each week, and I just wanted to say thank you. So if you see me out and about, I'd be honored just to say hello to you, to meet you. But again, thanks so much for listening to the conversation. Have a great rest of your day.